You're listening to the How to Talk to Girls podcast, where you'll learn step-by-step how to meet and seduce beautiful women, whether you're looking for one night of fun, a week-long fling, or a long-term relationship. I'm your host, Trip, and the episode starts now. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the How to Talk to Girls podcast. I'm your host, Trip Kramer from tripadvice.com. Welcome back. Today we have a great interview with a fellow dating coach. His name is Lloyd Dixon, aka The Single Guy. Maybe you've seen some of his stuff on YouTube. Well, this guy, he's a wealth of information, and he's here to talk to you about some of the things that society is telling you that's really hurting your chances with meeting women and dating, and is basically doing nothing for you. It's killing your game. And so today, me and him discuss what those things are, and he brings some of these things to the table, and we go after it. And I really agree with everything he's saying here and everything that we're discussing. You know, this is stuff that you maybe hear from your friends, your family, stuff you see in the movies or on TV or just anywhere on the internet and the general public and the media, things that really are hurting your chances, like I said. And so we dissect those and then we reverse them. We say, okay, if that's the thing that is being told to you, what's the correct thing? What's the thing that's going to actually help you in terms of getting more dates, meeting more women, being able to sleep with the women that you want, get into the type of relationship you want? What's the truth here? So we dive into that. I'm very excited to do it with Lloyd. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Here's my interview with Lloyd Dixon. Hey, Lloyd, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Trip. It's a real pleasure to be here. Like I told you before, I'm a huge fan of your channel and everything.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you on here. And I've noticed that you and I talk a lot about similar things. That's not necessarily why I have people on the podcast. I like to have people on also who talk about different things and get different perspectives. But I just noticed that you and I talk about similar things. So it's cool to have you on here and hear some of your thoughts. And maybe you can tell the guys listening how you got into this and how you started. And because you told me before we got on this podcast that you do this full time. So not a lot of people do this full time. How did you get into all this?
Oh, cool. That's a great question. You were actually a pretty big inspiration when I first started. You've been doing this for a little bit longer than me. But yeah, I think like I told you before this podcast started, I've always been a guy when I was coming in school, I always felt like there was something wrong with me. I just couldn't get social interaction. The girls that I liked in school, they never liked me back. I was kind of a loner when I was in college and just didn't really understand people a whole lot. And at the time I was doing like a lot of very nerdy subjects. Like I was a physics major in college. And so I tackled things from a very logical perspective. And when you're dealing with human interaction, eventually it breaks down at a certain point. So I realized that I just wasn't good enough in this area of my life. And so I made it an effort to really learn as much as I could. And the information that I was kind of digesting at that point was a lot of pickup stuff, a lot of different things, and trying to go about it in that way, I feel like was a pretty long and tough journey. And I always told myself, I was like, Jesus, this shouldn't be this hard. There should be a more practical, a more actionable and easier way to give people advice and help people get to where they need to be. Guys like me, I felt like if I could have helped myself 5 years ago to get to where I am now, which is, someone who's a great dating life, amazing dating life, and who's very confident in themselves, like, is there a better way to do that? And I just felt like the materials at that time were not really good enough. I mean, when I first started, I think yours was the only channel that I saw that I was like, this guy's actually giving legitimate good advice.
Cool.
There wasn't a lot of that.
That's funny because I remember when I started, there was only a few people who were doing it. And now I think almost everyone who I saw who was a dating coach or talking about dating in some fashion doesn't do it anymore.
Yeah, they drop off.
Interesting. Yeah, they do drop off. Only a few people, even like the interesting, like the Real Social Dynamics guys, like even they, I mean, I know they still do dating advice, but they don't really talk about it.
They don't talk about it. They do it like underground.
Right. So even they've changed a little bit. So yeah, and then it's cool to see all the people who come onto the scene like yourself. I love talking to guys who are into it. It's funny because I'm not going to name names, but I've talked to other people in the industry and they're like really competitive. It's like, oh no, like I don't want to talk to that person or to that person. Yeah, kind of. It's just like, no, man. Like, no. Like, first of all, there is no competition. because people are going to like you or they're not going to like you. And it has nothing to do if there's other people on the scene, you know.
Yeah.
If they
Yeah.
like you, it's not like someone else is going to come along and go, oh, well, now I hate Lloyd. So now I'm going to
Hmm.
go look at this other person. No, they just might like you and someone else, you
Hmm.
know. And so if your information's great, you'll stand out. But if it's not, it was never going to win in the first place. So, you know, it doesn't really matter. So throw competition. I always say throw competition on. Almost similar to with women actually in dating. Really the same
Hmm.
things. Women are going to like you or they're not. You know, don't think of yourself in competition with other men. You're in competition with yourself. And that's pretty much it. Like, how can you be better
Yeah.
than yesterday? Otherwise, it's just completely irrational to think you're in competition with anyone else because you're just not. That's not how it works, and that's not
Hmm.
what's really affecting, you know, your game and dating, and also same thing with with business, right? It's all
Yeah.
kind of related. So
Dude, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because these guys, they all, the guys whose names you didn't mention, they're always about the abundance mentality, but it's ironic that they do not have the abundance mentality when it comes to this area, right?
right, exactly. It's like, listen, there's plenty of people out there, and you know, there's nothing that you can do. So just focus on yourself, put out your best work, and that's all you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always recommend that if someone comes to me for coaching, I'm like, look, man, like pick the guy who you feel like gets your story the most. If it's not me, then there's somebody out there that will, maybe come from a more similar background to you or, has similar things that he talks about that you really resonate with. Go with that person. I mean, there's no shortage of people out there that need help with this.
Exactly. Exactly. I like that. That's cool. So yeah, so that brings us to what we're talking about today. You got some
Perfect.
things to say on some of the things that are happening out in society, what's
Hmm.
going on with the talk outside and what the media and some people are saying that can really be hurting what's going on with your dating life and giving you the wrong mindsets, so to speak.
Hmm.
So why don't we dive into some of those and just chat about it and see where it takes us?
Yeah, so this is kind of, I mentioned the Me Too movement before this. I'm going to lump also kind of what's going on in here right now because they're kind of related. They're both okay. So when the Me Too movement came out, women were a lot of women online, the most vocal ones. They were saying a lot of bad things about men, and some was rightfully so. There was a lot of bad men out there that are doing bad things. But one of the things that they didn't really realize that it was going to do is it kind of kills sex a little bit because now the guys that were nice guys to begin with who weren't doing any of these bad things, now they're even more scared to make a move, to be a man, to be courageous. Like it just the guys who really are afraid, I suppose, of getting me too'd or whatever. I've gotten tons of questions or tons of guys bring that up to me about that. They turn into even more nice guys, and it's out of fear. And so I think that a lot of what the media propagates, whether it's Me Too or even right now, is fear based. So people are becoming, because of the mainstream news, especially with this quarantine we got going on right now with the coronavirus, people are becoming more fearful of interacting with the other person because whether this person, there might be negative repercussions where, she says that you assaulted her and you were just saying hi or whatever. Guys have that fear, even though it's pretty irrational. Like I've never really heard about that happening with any of my clients or students. And, I talk to a lot of guys and I've put myself in a lot of crazy situations. Never had any problems with that. Again, with the coronavirus, you're getting a disease where, yes, there are legitimate concerns about it, but the average risk for a healthy young human being on this planet are very negligible. So I think a lot of the messages that we get from the mainstream about interacting from person to person, it's getting people to be more fearful of interacting with each other, and it's just not true. For instance, right now, even I was able to actually meet up with online dating with a couple of girls this week, and they had the same mentality that I did. That they knew it was a legitimate concern for some people. They were trying to be safe, but ultimately for them, they were still willing to risk a little bit for some human interaction, for some possible romance. Those kinds of basic human needs are never going to go away. And it's important that we remind ourselves of that rather than being scared to interact with people all the time, whether it's Me Too or whether it's the coronavirus.
Yeah, the media will definitely blow things up and make it more kind of crazy and out there than it really is, just because
Hmm.
they want to get your attention and they
Yes.
want to have you read their stuff and watch their stuff and catch your eyes with something that's crazy when
Hmm.
really, it's not, this doesn't really pertain to you. Like the
Yeah.
guy who's trying to meet women, don't worry about the Me Too movement. You're not sexually harassing women at work.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you're probably not doing that. Most
Yeah.
likely, I'd say you're fine. I don't think that there are women out there who are macing guys in the face for going up and saying hello to them. That's probably not, if you're listening to this podcast, that's probably not your problem.
Yeah.
These are the guys who are overly aggressive, who are the overly aggressive at work. So they
Hmm.
end up, making mistakes and sexually harassing women, and people who are over aggressive on the street and
Hmm.
catcalling and doing all these weird things that doesn't work. This is these guys, which you don't have to worry about. That's not going to be you.
Hmm.
That's not going to be you. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
don't worry about it. Like you'll be fine. Just keep going and doing what you were doing, and it will be okay.
Exactly. Exactly. I come from San Francisco, and like a lot of there's been a couple times, very, very left leaning people here in San Francisco. And there have been a couple times where women have complained about a situation like that, where maybe a guy assaulted her on the street or something, like the crazy things that you hear about. Right. And I'm like, oh, damn, that's crazy. Like what happened? And then she'll be describing the situation. And then eventually I'll come to realize like it was a crazy homeless person. Like this is not the kind of person who's going to come to me for coaching or who watches my videos or the average
Right.
person listening to this podcast, right? Like this is something that definitely does happen, but I think a lot of guys are worried about it when they're really not in the bracket of men that women are complaining about.
Right. Right. Exactly. Cool. So what's your next one?
So my next one, I was going to talk about basically the typical thing that they say a lot in the mainstream because it's very attractive to a lot of women will say this. A lot of people on talk shows who are trying to be, politically correct and motivating. They say the whole "be yourself" thing. Just be yourself, and that's the kind of message that I've heard time and time again when I was single and trying to meet women. And it's good, and it's also horrible, right? I'm sure you've had a lot of guys trip yourself that have been told that their whole life. Just be yourself. And how well does it usually work out for them?
Well, they are being themselves. That's why it's a problem.
Exactly, exactly.
Everyone's being themselves. So it's the worst advice because it's just saying, it's not answering someone's question. If someone's asking you a question and they're trying to get dating advice or get some results in this area, you're basically saying, you're fine. Don't worry about it. When it's like, no, I'm not fine. That's why I'm asking the question. So
Hmm.
it's completely ignoring. This is the kind of deeper look into that.
Hmm.
You're just ignoring the question, really.
Exactly. And you're being dismissive of the person's problems too. So like that's why a lot of guys get annoyed. And I guess if someone's giving them advice and they tell you to just be yourself, whether it's a parent or maybe it's a girl that you're friends with that you want to make into like your girlfriend, and she's saying, "Oh, just be yourself and women will come to you." And you're like, "Well, you didn't come to me at all." Like, it's obviously not working. So it's kind of like it's dismissive of the person's problem. I remember there was one time where I was talking to a client, and sometimes I'll talk about stuff that happened in their past or whatever. And his parents would tell him this advice all the time. He told his dad. He came to his dad one time. He was crying from school, and he walked up to his dad, and his dad says, "Hey, what's going on, son? Like, you seem like you're really upset." And he goes, "I just don't know why. Like, I'm not a popular kid. Like the kids at school don't like me. Like, I'm not cool. They don't want to hang out with me." And his dad basically thought he was being comforting, thought he was being helpful, and just said, "Wow, like that's crazy. Like you should just be yourself, and whoever doesn't want to be around you, that's their loss. Like I think you're an awesome person, blah blah blah." And yeah, sure, it might pick him up very temporarily in the moment, or to be honest, I don't think it even helped him out in the moment. What his dad was really saying was that what you're saying is not true. I think you're a cool person, and you're being upset about nothing, basically. What he should have done, I think, was he should have asked him, why do you feel like that? Why do you feel like they hang out with other kids? Really got down to the root of the problem, and possibly come up with a solution. Maybe there's some changes he could have made. Maybe he wasn't hanging out with the right people or the right crowds, or he was alone during lunch and recess, and he could have been spending more time with people. There's a lot of solutions that could have happened, but because he was giving the classic, "Oh no, you're fine, like just be yourself and things will work out," like that kind of answer didn't help him. I see this a lot with guys who are trying to get good with dating with women.
I agree, and I think that this actually just clicked as we're talking. This is kind of
Hmm.
cool. I think that I don't want to come down too hard on the people who say just be yourself. Because you know
Hmm.
what they're really saying, and this is good advice, but they're not saying it in the right words.
Right.
And also, and I will say as a disclaimer, this advice won't work unless you do something to get to that point. And this will make sense now.
Hmm.
So when someone's saying just be yourself, what they're really trying to say is, hey, stop worrying so much and just act more comfortable in front of women. I
Hmm.
think that's what they're kind of saying. Like, just act more comfortable and relaxed around women. And I
Hmm.
agree with that. The thing is that's also kind of bad advice because that's not the advice because no one can just go, okay, I'll go do that. And
Yeah,
then they
wave a
go,
magic wand and
yeah, and just all of a sudden they're more comfortable. So the real advice is, well, you have to go out and practice and work on, meeting women and getting more comfortable with being who you are and working on your self-esteem and doing all those things, right? And so that there's a lot there. It's all kind of packed into the just be yourself, aka, hey, just be more comfortable around women and be cool and collected,
hmm.
right? So that's what I think they're trying to say. And again, good advice in the sense of what they're trying to get at, but not good advice in terms of it being practical. But I think that's
Right.
what people are just trying to say. Like, hey, if you just kind of relax and get to the point where you can actually be yourself and
Hmm.
just be cool and comfortable in front of women, that will increase your attraction by, like 50% if
Hmm.
you can get to that point. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I totally agree. The hard part is though, it's like, how do we get this guy to relax around a pretty girl?
Exactly.
That's the part. That's the part they're
That's
not
the
thinking
thing.
about.
And that should be the person's question now. So that they should be like, okay. So now the question is that, right? That's what guys should be asking. Cool. So
Hmm.
how do I get comfortable around women? And how do I make it so it's going to be so much less stressful for me and I'm not showing up, on these dates or these approaches or whatever, like a nervous wreck?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And it's tough for a parent or a pretty girl to answer that question because she's never had to deal with that. She's never had to be nervous around a pretty girl. And a parent, even if it's your dad, I'm just saying with my dad's been married to my mom for 32 years or whatever. He's been out of the game for a long, long time. And most parents, they don't, or they come from a different era when courting a woman was a little different than it is now. There's no Tinder back then, so I guess that their memories of it are they're not used to dealing with the problems that a lot of the guys that I talk to are dealing with on a daily basis.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
Cool. So let's go into the next one.
Yeah. So typically you get these two kinds of guys. We talked about the mainstream media makes us fearful of talking to women, whether it's the coronavirus or whether it's Me Too. Then we talked about how like when they do give you advice, they tell you, okay, just be yourself and everything will work out. Okay. And then the last one that a lot of guys end up doing as a result of these two things, these two messages, they realize that they don't help them. They kind of reject them. So then the final thing that they usually go for is the classic kind of pickup artist like thing that's been not, I don't know if it's as popular as it used to be, but I still get a lot of guys that reach out to me that use those terms. And I find that this is generally not that helpful. Like I don't know about anybody that uses the term AMOG frequently that does well with women. I just don't. I haven't met this person. Have you met this person, Trip? Have you met anybody who uses a lot of pickup terms that's doing great with women?
I mean, some, but it's just an interesting way to go about it. I think that there's a lot of pickup terms and things that are interesting and maybe they even work, but there's not as important. Like it's not part of the 80-20. The 80-20 being the most important things, that you should be really focusing on to attract women. Yeah, that's how I
Yeah.
feel about those things.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I would encourage guys to not use the pickup terms if they can. Talk like a normal human being. If a girl walks in your conversation and you're using all those acronyms, she's going to be like, "Who the hell are these guys?" So I think
It's a little weird. That's for sure.
yeah, it's a little weird. Um, so what I would recommend for a lot of these guys, and I think it's natural to kind of turn to those things, and then you go down the red pill rabbit hole, and I think the red pill has a lot of good things too. In MG Tao, even if guys who go down that route, a lot of these things are very popular as a result of the last two messages from the media that you get. But this is also a message from the media because a lot of people are in this. There's channels out there with hundreds of thousands of subscribers that talk about these sorts of things. And yes, it's good. It is like everything. It's a side of the truth. Okay. There is truth within it, but I think only exposing yourself to that side of the truth also makes you kind of incomplete. Now, what do I mean by this? I find that the guys who do like a lot of the pickup stuff, who really focus on that, yes, there's a lot of good things out there. They give you some stuff to talk about. They give you the confidence and a manner in which that you can walk up to and approach women and see if she likes you. I think that's awesome. However, I find that the guys who, like, let's say you're a guy and you walk into a bar, okay, which a lot of my clients will talk about, and you see a lot of cute girls in there, and then you walk up to each individual one, see if she likes you, and then you talk to her for a little bit. The conversation kind of dies down. Then after about half an hour, you kind of go back to the bar by yourself, and it hasn't really worked out with any of them. I see a lot of my clients when they walk in, that's kind of what happens to them. And it's because they're thinking about things in terms of like a pickup mentality. And the pickup stuff works, but you have to have like kind of a complete view of how social interaction works. Let's say instead you walked into that bar and you focused on having fun first, meaning meeting cool people, people that are going to bring your energy up, not focused on the woman yet, not treating it as a game where you're, okay, I got to talk to women, do the right techniques and it'll work. Move in, have fun, bring value, meet different people. Then you're feeling good. And then usually what happens is like women will kind of see you, or maybe you'll just have a better energy about yourself. You won't be so dependent on the outcome. You're just going to have a better interaction overall, and more likely that you're going to meet a girl. Even if you wanted to go home with her that night, you'd probably be more likely to meet that woman doing that method as opposed to just going strictly by walking up to each individual woman and doing like the pickup strategies. And the funny part is they actually talk about this. If you really look at a lot of the information, the stuff that I grew up with, whether it was like RSD or whether it was like, way back in the day where it was like Neil Strauss talking about it, they kind of do talk about this. They talk about bringing value. They talk about all of that stuff, but it somehow gets swept underneath the rug and not focused on as nearly as much as it should be with a lot of the clients that I get and students that have been, looking at that stuff for a while. So I think that when you look at the first two and you look like the complete opposite of it, taking any one of those things at face value is going to send you down the wrong path. Right.
Right. No, I agree with that. So where do you think a guy should start if he's trying to learn how to do all this stuff?
Okay. I think a guy, it depends on where he's at. Sometimes I'll get a guy who's been watching like dozens and dozens of videos online, hundreds of, I'll get a guy who like I have 200, you have a lot of videos out, Trip. How many videos do you have on YouTube?
I don't even know at this point, 600 or 700, I think.
Oh, 600 or 700. Have you ever gotten a client who's like come up to you and has watched every single one of your videos?
No, not every single one, but I've had guys who said I've had guys who said they've listened to every single podcast episode, and there's almost 400 of those.
Right.
I've had guys who said they've seen, hundreds of mine. I don't know if I've had, at one point, someone probably said that to me back in the day when I only had maybe 100 or 200.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, they say they watch a lot. Why? What point you getting to?
So with this, like if I get a guy who's come to me and he's watched every single one of my videos, I'm super honored. But then I'll ask him the question. I'll be like, okay, cool. Well, what kinds of actions have you taken? And then he'll be like, oh, I haven't gone out at all. I'm like, okay, all right. We need to stop watching videos.
Yes, exactly.
And then go out and start talking to women or talk to anybody for, just get out of the house, do something, right? And so for those guys, I think, getting out and kind of expressing yourself and figuring out what scenarios work, what you like and what you don't like, I think is important. Understanding yourself and starting to take action. And then bit by bit, if you want to look up the information that's going to be relevant for you, then look it up at that time. But a lot of times what I'll notice is that if they've watched a lot of videos, they kind of have started inventing problems before they've even encountered them, which is, you get the whole paralysis by analysis. You end up not doing anything and not getting any results. So yeah, I would say, first of all, right now we're in quarantine. So if you're not on dating apps and, you're frustrated, let's get on some dating apps. Let's try a few things, try a few pictures. Probably when you first start, you're not going to get the results that you envision. and then learn by trial with error, and figure out what kinds of things that you need to do to get to where it is you want to be. So start with the goal, start with where it is you want to be, and write down the things that you think would help you get there. What you think is going to help you get there is probably not going to be right at first, but as you try new things, you'll learn and you'll get better. And then that's where me and you are kind of here for, is to help guys along that path so that it doesn't take them as long with this trial and error process to find the girl or girls or whatever dating life it is that they're trying to make for themselves, right?
Right. Exactly. I was just doing another podcast before this one, an interview, and we were talking about reverse engineering, right? Figuring out what you want, where you want to be, when you want to be there, and then working backwards to figure out a plan of how to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And it might involve watching some videos or listening to podcasts, absolutely, but that's only part of it, right? So if you want to get to that point, you need to do more than just listen and watch and read. You need to actually go out there. You
Mm-hmm.
need to start putting some things into action.
Mm-hmm.
You need
Yeah,
to start making
absolutely.
some things happen.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you the number of clients that I've signed on the phone with. They're the person who's describes to me in detail about all their shortcomings when it comes to women, dating, and that sort of stuff. And then I've asked them, in the midst of all this pain, I'm like, well, what exactly would you say your goal is with women? He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, so that's the most important thing for you to figure out, man, because it sounds like you're unhappy. It sounds like you're not where you want to be right now. But where do you want to be right now? If you don't know that, it's going to make it very difficult for you to get there.
Right. You have to know that. That's the first step. And a lot of guys don't know. They don't know what they want. They don't know what it is that they're looking for. So as clear as you can be on that, then at that point, you will be able to figure out how to get there. The more specific and more clear and more tangible your goal is, you can get to that point. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
just what it takes. That's what it takes to get to there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's actually a pretty good exercise that you can do about this that is kind of like free form. If anyone's listening to this, they can
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah,
they can do
let's
this.
hear.
So it's basically like the perfect day exercise. So just like take a blank sheet of paper, or you can use a Word document or something like that, and write out what your average perfect day would be. Like, maybe 5 years in the future, or whatever. And imagine like the ideal day for yourself. What does that day involve? Does it involve a wife? Does it involve, a girlfriend or multiple girlfriends? Or you're dating women? Do you want to what kind of women do you want to wake up next to? What kinds of things does she do when she wakes? Does she wake you up with breakfast? Do you want to be woken up with a blowjob or something like that? Like, write those things down and really picture it. Does that what your average day looks like? Do you want that to be your every average day? And really start to ask yourself the kind of life that you're looking for and living. And you'll honestly be surprised by the answers that you put down as you really start to think about this.
Right. Yep. And it's going to be hard. It might take you like 6 months to even really figure it out.
Because you
It's gonna be
tried something new and you're like, you know what? I thought getting a blowjob every single morning would be the best thing ever. And
but
I
it's the
kind of feel
worst.
uncomfortable when I wake up. Maybe I'd like to wake up in peace or by myself or whatever it is. I don't know. It might not be the right thing you're looking for. So,
Exactly. Better figure that out.
mhm.
So yeah, no, that's cool. What are some other techniques or thoughts you have for guys trying to figure this out?
What's crazy, Trip? Have you ever had clients where maybe you go out with them and they just don't know how to have fun?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
huge
Uh,
problem.
Yeah, huge problem. Okay. And that's part of the reason why they're not getting women, is because they don't know how to have fun themselves. So, what I would recommend, if anyone feels like is like thinking in their head, yep, that's me, what you should do is write down 10 things that you can do that's only dependent on yourself. 10 things that you can do that's only dependent on yourself to make yourself feel good. And you can do this in quarantine, man. This is a perfect exercise to do in quarantine. It's something that I work on with my clients too, is you basically write down these 10 things, whether it's doing some workouts, maybe you dance for a little bit in your room by yourself, I don't know, or maybe you cook yourself a nice meal, something that's not dependent on other people. An example of something that probably wouldn't be a good example of something that makes you feel good is, I had one guy write to me, oh, I enjoy when a pretty girl smiles and talks to me. It's like, well, okay, there's a good chance that you can get that if you walk out, but you can't control that yourself. This has to be 100% within your control. So write down 10 things that make yourself feel good, and figure out the types of things that you like doing. And what you'll start to notice is when you go out, you'll gravitate towards the things that you have more fun with, and as a result, be more attractive, and you'll understand yourself better. And using that is how you build confidence and build yourself into a man that women want to be around. that women are attracted to.
Yes. Yes. I like that. You have some really good thoughts here, some good principles. I like what you stand for. If guys want to work with you, where can they find you and how can they do so? What do you have to offer?
Well, you can check out my YouTube channel. Basically, the YouTube channel, just type in The Single Guy, one word. That's the best way to check out my content. If you want to get into contact with me, I recommend that you DM me on Instagram because I don't really have that as many subscribers or followers as I do on YouTube. So if you type in a YouTube comment, I'm probably not going to see it. But if you sent me a DM on Instagram, that's probably the best way. So my Instagram handle is @single.guy. So that's the handle right now. Yeah, just send me a DM on there or join one of my Facebook groups and you can send me a message there too. But yeah, that's the best way to get in contact with me.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, we'll put that in the show notes so guys can check you out and contact you if they need to, or just check out some more of your stuff and watch some of your videos. So yeah, man, thanks for being here and thanks for doing this interview and going over some really important concepts that I think is good to talk about. I know I've talked about these randomly throughout videos and things like that and some podcasts, but it's always good to bring this stuff back so guys can really understand they don't have to listen to all the nonsense out there and they can just focus on themselves and not be, swayed in any sort of way, just because, all your friends are meeting girls in a certain way or they're giving you some bad advice or whatever the news is saying. Be skeptical. Hey, be skeptical in terms of what we're saying right now. Don't just blindly believe anything, which is, I think, one of the big points that we're kind of saying here. So anywho, thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this, man. And maybe we'll have it on again.
Thanks so much for having me, Trip. It was a real pleasure being here.